Hi, everybody, and welcome to another episode of Freeing Your Mind podcast. I'm your host, Daniel Dukeman, and this week I have with me Scott Frank. How are you doing, Scott?
Doing great. How about you?
Doing good, thanks. So, a couple weeks back, Scott and I connected about the podcast and his story that he'd like to share. So, we'll just dive right in. Scott, tell us about yourself and your background and all
All
the
right.
all the things, right?
Yeah. I've been a respiratory therapist for a little over 18 years. Um, Recently remarried just this last April to the most amazing woman, the love of my life, and couldn't be happier. Between the two of us, we have four adult kids. I have two boys, and she has a boy and a daughter. And on top of that, we have a grandson from my oldest son. Yeah, life's amazing.
Yeah,
I wish I could see my grandson more. Wish we could see our kids more, but we're gonna get there. We're gonna make it happen.
yeah,
Um, yeah, like I said, I've been a respiratory therapist for 18 years. It's been a it's been a good journey. Like I said, it's afforded me a good life. Um, I've been able to pay the bills and um, but overall, the last, I would say, 3 or 4 years, I haven't been extremely happy with what I've been doing, and I definitely want more. And so you know, I'm looking into other options, and that's where I'm at right now. But as far as being a respiratory therapist, I've always enjoyed people, taking care of people, and it's something that I got into. And it was good for a long time. I enjoyed going to work. I enjoyed taking care of my patients. I enjoyed the camaraderie with my fellow respiratory therapists and nurses and doctors. Um, and something changed, and I can't exactly say when that changed as to why I don't have that passion anymore, but I have a few ideas as I look back. But something that's always bothered me about healthcare is the fact that there's not a great support system for seeing and doing the things that we do as healthcare professionals. And we see death, we see people at their worst, we see family members suffering, we see them at their loved one's bedside and having to go through that with them. And over the years, it takes a toll on you. And some people, like to say, oh, it doesn't take a toll on me, but I really do believe that it does take a toll on you. And it's hard to see some of the things that we see, and hard to just kind of get a good grasp on things that we do. And so I would say a few years into being a respiratory therapist, I didn't really see it at the time, but there was just things that we had to do, especially when it comes to kids. When you get a kid that comes in through the ER that is coding, and you're doing everything possible to bring that kid back to life, and you have parents or family members there, and they're watching, or they're outside, and they can hear everything going on, and you can hear them crying and screaming, and it's rough. It truly is rough. One instance early on in my career is a child decided to take his life by hanging himself, and the mom was beside herself. And we worked on that kid for a while, but this was a young kid, and mom blamed herself, and it was rough, and at that time I didn't know what to do. I had other coworkers that were involved, and some of them just kind of went on their way. And in healthcare, you kind of have to just put it to the back of your mind. You have other patients you got to go see, and You got to move along, and sometimes you don't have time to process everything. But sometimes you need to just take a step back and give yourself just a couple minutes, even a few seconds, and just let it out. Maybe talk to somebody, and that's what happened. I remember I went into a room, into an office, and I just wanted to just start bawling my eyes out because that's the first real trauma I had seen with a child. And another respiratory therapist came in the room and, told me, it's okay. You can cry, let it out. We can talk about it. It's good. And at that moment, it kind of hit me like, wow, I'm going to see a lot of this, and I'm going to need to make sure I have a good support system, people that I can talk to, people I can rely on. Because I think in general in healthcare, at least early on when I started, people just wanted it. They just wanted you to just go about your business, put it to the back of your mind. You don't need to talk about it. You don't need to cry. You're going to see this all the time. You're just going to have to learn to deal with it. And that's a poor way of dealing with some of the trauma and stuff that we see. And I just remember that night, I think it was, I don't know, midnight, 1 o'clock in the morning. I called home and I asked to talk to my kids. Like I didn't care what time it was. I needed to talk to my kids. I needed to tell them I love them. And that was big, just being able to express myself. And sometimes we hold our emotions in. It's not healthy at all. And like I said, over the years, see it too often in healthcare where we go through a code with a child or even an adult, and you don't process it, and you just walk away and you never talk about it again. So I wish that hospitals would realize that, and I think maybe they're starting to, because they have debriefings and stuff. But sometimes people feel uncomfortable talking in a group setting, about what they saw or what they did, or and they just need that one-on-one person, somebody that's just going to listen, So, but yeah, that's kind of my story for my current profession in healthcare, and yeah.
And I think that's all like super important and true, because so much of it, sometimes there just is not that time to debrief ever. It's like the shift goes on, and you just get hit back to back with multiple patients or calls in my case, and you end up, before you know it, a whole shift has elapsed, and maybe if you're lucky, there's a time that you can catch it on the next shift and talk about it with the crew. Maybe not. And the debriefings do help, but it does take a very, very tight knit group of people in those debriefings for people
Definitely.
willing to actually talk. And I've sat in a lot of those where it was a room of just silence, and you could look around and know that, like, hey, I'm not okay. You can look at everyone else in that room and go, just not one of these people is okay. But everybody in the room is just sitting there going, yep, I'm fine, because nobody wants to talk about it. They're just
No.
not comfortable. It's the just, you got to be tough. You don't want to be perceived as weak, and all these things. And ultimately, we have to either choose to be the catalyst to change that, and to be the one that's like, no, I'm not all right, and neither are the rest of you. And I think sometimes that's needed. You have to be willing to do it, though. You have to be vulnerable. Somebody has to break that ice. And sometimes I've been in that space where I've done that, and I was the only one who said anything. But I could look at everybody else in that room and see them trying to hold back tears.
Right.
Or it's enough that the other folks in there just start opening up. And uh, it is a very unnatural thing that first responders and medical staff do, to be surrounded by traumas and death and horrible things, and then we just kind of have to brush it off and just, no, that's life, let's go on, sunny days. And it's not.
Right.
And so it's not a natural thing, and it's important that we recognize that it's not normal, that humans shouldn't be seeing those things, obviously, because we are humans, and we have the capacity to care and nurture and love for one another, we're going to see those things, because otherwise we wouldn't try. And that would just
Right.
be the end of it. And because we care, and we are what innately makes us compassionate humans, we're going to see those things and we're going to put ourselves in those situations. But it's important that we also recognize that because we're have the capacity to care, we need to have the capacity to express those emotions that we feel for sorrow and whatever else is there, anger, the whole range of things that you can feel after these events.
I agree.
And oftentimes it's a one-on-one that you have better luck with somebody that you're close to. But it's important that we need to tell people getting into these professions. I know when I got into fire, nobody was like, "Hey, you're going to see some really messed up stuff," and and then we're just going to all act like it's cool and like there's not a problem at all. We're just going to go about our day. Nobody told me that, and I'm sure nobody told you that, and they're probably still
Nope.
not telling anybody that in the medical service. Uh,
No.
I do think everybody's slowly getting better, but we should be very much leading with that you're going to see some bad things and it's going to be hard to deal with, and you need to talk about them. It's okay to talk about them. It's not weakness, it's actually strength to be able to talk
Yes.
about the things like this that are the most difficult.
Oh, definitely. Um, so after a couple of years, I actually, as a respiratory therapist, I got into teaching as well for the community college, and so I was a clinical instructor. So students would come to the hospital, and I would be their clinical instructor for 6 to 8 hours a week. But I remember talking to some of these new students, people that are, maybe they've never been in the medical field before, like myself. I had never been in the medical field. And I felt like they needed somebody like myself to tell them about these experiences and tell them, what they're going to see and what to expect,
Mhm.
prepare them, because like you just said, that wasn't given to us before we got in these fields. Nobody ever said, the death that you see or the trauma that you see is it's going to be hard on you sometimes. And so I think if you can be that kind of mentor and be that person that gives these people a heads up, it prepares them. I get, as much as you can be prepared for it. Um, but I know that there was some students that after they saw a few things and hearing what I had to tell them, they're like, this isn't for me. And it's good because you don't want the wrong person in the field, somebody, and I think too often we, especially in healthcare, we're just trying to get these people through because healthcare is so short staffed. We got we got to get these people through their schooling and get them hired on. And then sometimes people don't realize it until they're in the field and they go, wow, I made a mistake. I can't
Yeah.
deal with it. So
Yeah, definitely. I think getting the people who understand what they're getting into fully, and being able to process those things in a positive way certainly creates for career longevity.
right.
Because if we break these people, I'll use the term break, but I mean like if we put them in a bad mental space, we break them early on in their career and don't have a good support system to get them back on track and to fix them, to help them pick up the pieces, we're wrecking them for life potentially. But we're also taking away that longevity of that career when that person probably really had like genuine desires to serve in the medical field or whatever field it's in, but they were just inadequately prepared to do so.
Right. Yeah. I 100% agree. Too often, just see it too often because this trauma that maybe you weren't aware of, um, people process things differently. And I look at my own experience, years of night shift and dealing with the trauma, and it turned into an unhealthy lifestyle. I was not eating well, I wasn't exercising. I would look forward to going home in the morning and drinking a beer or two. And, that's some people say, oh, that's big deal. You go home after work and have a beer. Well, if you're doing it every day, it's unhealthy, especially when you're not exercising and you're not eating well. You're allowing a bad habit to form, and that can lead to more problems.
Yeah. And I think certainly if you're on that night shift, it makes it even more difficult because you're you're trying to switch your body's natural circadian rhythm to function at night when it's dark and your body's saying it's time to sleep. And then you're trying to sleep during the day when you know it's light outside.
Yeah.
And when I've worked night shifts periodically through my life, it's always been like there's only that small window of the year where it's dark in the morning still when you get off of work. So you have half a chance of getting home and like maybe falling asleep before the sun comes up.
Right.
And the rest of the time you're just host. That's not going to happen for me. I'm
Yeah.
very much I need a dark space to sleep in. Even regular days like I will put a blindfold on just to keep any little ambient light out, at least till I fall asleep. And then at some point, an hour or two into the night, I'll wake up real quick and rip it off. But it, you're asking for more problems being on night shift, but it is a part of the job. But
It is.
sometimes night shifts just where the party's at. It's where you're gonna see things that the good and the bad. But
Right.
especially when I've done time the times that I've done ER time for like my EMT and stuff, the night shifts were the best to come
Oh
in.
man.
And a lot of people like don't don't maybe recognize it, but full moons are a thing.
Right.
And so you do your training. If you want to know if this is for you, you take night shifts for your hospital time and do it during a full moon. And
Right.
all the craziness happens at once, and you'll know if it's for you or not after that.
Right. Yeah. I mean, you have the full moon, you have less staff, less resources. Um, you get patients that, get on the same schedule as you and they go batshit crazy, I mean, um, and yeah, but I would have to say though, night shift, I love night shift because of the camaraderie. There was definitely a much tighter knit group on night shift than on day shift. And I'm on day shift now, but still, working nights, it was you had that tight knit group. You had people you could depend on, and yeah, night shift's a different beast.
Yep, for sure.
Not everybody realizes what's involved.
Yep.
You know.
Yeah,
So,
that is completely for sure. So, in your process to this, I mean, you said you started like making more unhealthy choices, and obviously it's harder with shift work. It's harder to stay on track with healthy food alone.
right,
That's
right,
already difficult enough in our day-to-day life, regardless of night shift or day shift. And
right.
then, like the thing that with alcohol, like it always sets us back. Like it'll make us feel better for the moment, but it is even just a few beers, one or two like drinks, is gonna make you feel a little bit, not as well rested the next day. It might help you fall asleep quicker. But it's in your body, it metabolizes to sugar, which really doesn't equate to a good night's sleep.
Right.
It might I do think a little drink in the evening definitely helps me fall asleep easier, but the next day I can tell its effects, especially now that I don't drink like I used to.
Uh-huh.
Once I really curbed my heavy drinking as I fixed my mental health, and now like I'll have a drink with dinner or something on the weekend when I'm out with my girlfriend, and the next morning I'm like, man, I kind of feel like crap today, and it's just a little bit. It's not a hangover. It's just like I'm more tired than I would normally be. And
Right.
and those things add up, and that starts to affect you, and it affects everybody differently, of course, but for you, you recognized it as a problem.
Yeah.
And so once you recognized it as a problem, what well, first off, what was it about that behavior that caused you to recognize it as a problem?
I just got really tired of feeling lousy and terrible. Like I said, I put on weight, and I wasn't being accountable to myself, as far as my health. And I always felt like I was more tired, and working night shift, you are tired a lot. But I would, try and get 4 to 6 hours of sleep, but man, it definitely affected me, affected my mood. I felt like I was a little more, maybe more short tempered. And so I just told myself, said, I got to stop this. Like, I don't need to have a beer every morning when I come home. I mean, yes, sometimes it sounds really good, it tastes good, but I can have a beer on my days off. I don't need to continue to do this. And that's me. That's for me. I made that decision. And at one point I lost like 50 pounds because I made the decision to stop some of those habits or ways of life, that were affecting me. And I definitely felt a lot better. It was tough. It wasn't easy at all. It was tough, because I had to make that decision, and I felt like I didn't have a great support system. People that didn't understand the night shift way of life and how hard it was sometimes to get sleep. And but I forced myself to do it, and here I am today. I mean, I'm still working at it. I definitely know that I can do better health wise. But I go to the gym, I exercise more, I definitely eat healthier. I still drink, but I drink, socially,
Yeah.
have drinks with friends, or very rarely do I even come home in the evenings anymore after my 12-hour shift and have a drink. I'll have dinner, and I'll drink water, and occasionally I'll have a beer or a glass of wine, but that's very rare on the days that I work.
Mhm.
And I felt that has definitely helped my mental health, because I have more clarity. I don't have that beer or that wine, even though it might only be one, impairing my thoughts. I definitely feel that I have more mental clarity. And when I do drink, I suffer the consequences. I mean, you wake up the next day not feeling great sometimes, and you lacked energy, and it's you have to be accountable for yourself.
Mhm.
So
Yeah, and I think it definitely does change things as far as our energy goes, um, and it's a choice for sure. Some people really don't ever see it as a problem, and they never allow it to become a problem in their life. For me, I know that I'm certainly better off without it
mhm.
than I am with it, and that's why I choose not to drink very often, because I want to feel good, and I want to feel present in whatever situation that I'm in. And I also recognize now that alcohol was a huge mask for me.
Mhm.
I mean, that was what I used to try to drown all the emotions and everything that I was dealing with. And I recognize that now. And so very much whenever I want a drink and it's outside of that social aspect of having a drink, I immediately question myself, well, why do I want that drink? What is it about the drink that makes me want it, or this particular situation? And usually that's enough for me to work through that and just question myself why. So maybe
Right.
I'll say, well, it was kind of a shitty day. It'd be kind of nice to just relax a little bit. Like, well, is that really going to help you relax? Or can you
Right.
relax without that? Do you have other tools to relax without that? Yeah, I have other tools. Okay, like what? And so I usually end up talking myself down, because I recognize the path, the potential of it, right? So once you made those shifts, what else did you do? I mean, you said you started working out more. You cut the alcohol way back and made healthier eating choices. Was there anything else that you added to that?
I feel like I made a conscious effort to realize who my group of friends were, you know, because I thought everybody was my friend at work, and I had good coworkers and stuff, but not everybody's your friend.
Mm,
And I made an effort to make sure that I was um, friends and hanging out with positive people,
mm,
people that I could relate with, and um, because, like I said, I didn't have the greatest support system at home, and my kids were little at the time, so now they're adults. I can talk to them about stuff, and we have good conversations. And
mm.
but when they're young, I'm not gonna burden my kids with anything like that. They're kids. They should be kids and enjoying life. And um, but yeah, I mean, I think that's definitely one of the things, because I feel connections and relationships, like, that's huge. If you have a good relationship with somebody or a good connection with somebody, and you're like-minded, and you support each other, um, you have that person that you can count on. So, and now, I went through a divorce, and at the time I thought it was bad, but actually it was probably the best thing that happened to me, because it put a lot of things into perspective. And I definitely became a better person, a better version of myself. I feel like maybe I'm kind of my old self from years ago, that was kind of hiding. And I have a great support system now. My wife supports me, and I support her, you know, unconditionally, 110% each and every day. We have bad days, good days, but we're always there for each other. And I feel, like I said, once again, relationships and communication are so important. And some people, um, I think, try to hide, and they don't want to talk. And so if you can just have small talk with somebody, you know, and that's what I would try to do sometimes with somebody I knew maybe was struggling at work with a situation. I would just have a little bit of small talk with them, and you know talk to them, and maybe get them to open up a little bit. And that's when they would open up, and they'd would say, oh my gosh, I'm having a super difficult time with what happened in the ER tonight and what I saw. And um, in the end, they thank you, and that at the end of the day, at the end of your 12-hour shift, felt good to talk to somebody and help them with their problems. And that they're going to go home in a better place, a better, their head's going to be in a better place, because they were allowed to open up and kind of get it off their chest. So,
Yeah, absolutely. And I think we kind of lose sight of that too, because with the paradigm shift that I really do believe is taking place in regards to how we handle mental health in the medical field, fire, police, military, all that. Um, we are actively making that shift from saying, like, trying to say, hey, if you talk about it, it's weak, where really it's strength. But we all got into these professions to help.
right.
And I always thought that I was in fire in the emergency medical services to help when the alarm went off, right? And just in the last year and a half, and more longer than that, I've known that I wanted to do something else. I wanted to help people, but I didn't necessarily believe that it was going to be continuing to be in the fire service.
Right.
And what I've discovered is that I very much have gained a passion for helping people that I've always had, but it's just turned from, I'm not necessarily just helping people when the alarm goes off, but I want to help my coworkers. I want to help people that I interact with their mental health, because once we've dealt with the trials of mental health, and it doesn't matter who it is, this isn't just me, I mean, this is anybody who's gone through it and struggled and done the work to get back into a good place. You're an expert at it now, and that
Right.
gives you and it's hard for people to really fathom that, but you're an expert in your own way, like, even if it's just that little bit of work in particular that you did. But it gives you an opportunity to be a light and a beacon,
to somebody else that's getting started in the field, or somebody that's been in the field for a long time, that just, whatever reason, some calls don't bother people for a long time, and then all of a
Right.
sudden there's the one that's just too much. It's the straw that broke the camel's back.
Right.
and
I agree.
and as first responders, as medical professionals, really any walk of life, anybody who's dealt with their own mental health and turned it around in their life into a positive space, we owe it to ourselves to share that knowledge and those experiences with others. We owe it to ourselves to use that information and be a positive force for anybody who's out there that's struggling. So if you see somebody, to just have that little conversation, just that's really about nothing, just small talk, that gives them
Right.
the ability to feel comfortable enough to open up. Because it maybe isn't even that you're doing anything in particular other than just being there to listen, being that shoulder to lean.
Yep.
And it's so important. And I've certainly had people that I've worked with over the years who have been that shoulder to lean on, and I've been that shoulder to lean. And that's what it's all about. I mean, we're not just there to help the patient, we're there to help each other.
Yeah, we definitely need to help each other. And I think some people forget that. I mean, if you're not helping each other, if you're not present and you're just not right mentally, you're not going to be able to help your patient, and you're not going to be able to help your coworkers to help your patients. So yeah, I mean, the last couple of years going through the pandemic and everything, it was a big struggle for a lot of people, because not only did we see traumas and we saw death, but one of the worst things that we could have done is we didn't allow family members or friends in the hospital to be with that dying or sick family member of theirs or their friend. And that was I feel that was huge trauma on staff and patients. There's a lot of people that left the profession because they said, we weren't doing the right thing. We let people die alone, or a patient died with, the nurse had to hold the patient's hand, but in all reality, it should have been the family that was there. And so I feel we're going to see, and already seen it, the trauma from that.
Absolutely. Big
and
time.
people don't talk about it a lot. They hold it in because I feel like they're afraid to talk about it. But man, we have to talk about it. And we have to make sure that never ever happens again. Somebody that's dying or is sick, they need their family, they need their friends, they need their family or friend there telling them jokes, making them laugh. I mean, laughter and happiness heals, and when you take that away from a patient that is at the lowest of their lows, they're the worst, worst they've ever felt in their life, and you tell them, I'm sorry, you can't see your family member, or you can see your family member on a screen, but you can't touch them. Like, that destroyed a lot of people's will to live, I think, So, yeah.
And I would even add to it that made it so the family members were not allowed to have closure.
Right.
The family members were not allowed to be present with their loved ones in a way that was meaningful, and they possibly hold some regret because of that, even though there was nothing they could do about it. Or some level of fault and grief over it, because there is something to be said for the acts of service or acts of love and kindness. And when we deny people the ability to help, we're denying them the ability to use that as an outlet for their own emotional well-being.
No, I 100% agree. Yeah. Those people are gonna, like I said, they have regret, they have resentment,
Mm-hmm.
They definitely will have anger towards healthcare professionals, even though, even though the nurse at the bedside it wasn't her policy, they might absolutely hate that nurse, and it's sad, because there's so many of us that spoke out and tried to say, like, this isn't right, but it wasn't enough. There wasn't enough of us saying that, and yeah, we're seeing the consequences, not only from healthcare professionals and staff, but family members that weren't allowed to be with their dying loved one.
Yeah. I've heard some people talk about it's unknown too. Like they know their loved one died in the hospital. They know what they went there for, but there's a big difference between taking your loved one to the hospital and being by their side when they pass versus taking them to the hospital, having the staff say, "We got them, thank you," and then them never coming out of the hospital.
Right.
Because
Yeah.
even and it's not like a conspiracy theory thing, like the hospitals were doing some mischievous, evil thing or anything to someone's loved one, but it's just the not known.
Yeah. Not
It's
knowing
the
the unknown.
physically not being there, the unknown, not seeing it, not being present in that situation, and that eats away at people. I mean,
Mhm.
that's why um, family members of uh, missing persons or crimes where they've never found the loved one or had closure to the crime, that's why that eats away at them for the rest of their life because they don't know.
Yeah.
Where if they knew, it would allow them to have that closure and at least have some peace knowing, like, okay, this is what happened. Everything's it's the not knowing. It's reading the whole book and then just ripping out the last chapter and burning it and then never getting to read that last chapter. You don't
Right.
know. And
You
that
don't know.
eats people alive.
Yeah. You're always wondering, you
Mm-hmm.
know, you're wondering, what would have been different if I could have been at the bedside? Would it have been different if I could have been there to advocate for my mom or my dad or my brother or sister, whoever,
Mm-hmm.
um, would they have made a turn for the better if I would have just been there holding their hand, Yeah, I can't imagine. I didn't lose any loved ones, in that situation, but I always tried to put myself in their footsteps and realize what they were going through and how hard it must be. So yeah.
Yeah, it's a rough one, and I'm very grateful that we're no longer in that moment in history where we're doing that anymore, and we've opened things back up, and because it was even affecting people when it came to just even transporting loved ones to the hospital,
Yeah.
where suddenly they weren't allowed to ride in at all, and maybe it was what a situation where it was work for them to find a ride in or to it didn't matter because you couldn't let them in on the ambulance to ride into the hospital, and then they'd get to the hospital and their loved one's already in the hospital, so they're just sitting in the waiting room at best.
Yeah, at best, or sitting outside on the bench, because, oh, hey, you can't come into the waiting room.
Yeah, and so
Yeah.
it was a big disservice to the nation, even the world's mental health, what we
Yeah.
did there, and wrong, right, or indifferent. Like we all have our opinions on that, and we'll just let
Yep.
everybody have their opinion. But the facts are that the pandemic caused a lot of mental health issues for a lot of
Definitely.
people. I mean,
Yeah.
you could even branch that out into children.
Yeah.
Like,
Oh, yes.
my kids went to school and were forced to wear masks. They were lucky enough to go to school, but
Yeah.
to wear masks and then to talk to the teachers, and the teachers are like, it's awful wearing a mask, and these
Yeah.
kids are having to do it, and then just even for to not be able to see the kids smile and the kids not be able to see the teacher smiling, it did force a lot of people to recognize that the eyes are like the window to the soul, but
Mhm.
so much facial expression was lost in being able to just really read a person and to feel their emotions without them talking because of that. And just the way that so much fear was instilled. And again, it's wrong, right? You know,
Mhm.
regardless, of how it went down, but the effects of it are real, and
They're
it's
definitely they're
definitely,
definitely real.
yeah, and it's something that we'll continue to deal with for quite a number of years. I mean, I've worked very hard with my children to help them to just be healthy and happy kids. But I
Yeah,
really think that the pandemic made them more um, antisocial than
definitely.
just the technology that every kid has now with a phone. So it just stacked it on top of that, where like my older two, 13 and 11, are very much like, yeah, I don't want to talk to somebody I don't know. That's weird. And you're like, no, you gotta go talk. You gotta go introduce yourself to people and like make conversation. And like that's where human connection happens. And it's a good thing.
It
And
is.
it's not even out of like some fear of being sick or anything. It's just because they were told for like 2 years to just stay away from people.
Right? Yeah. I feel it made him numb to emotions.
Mhm.
Like when you look at kids, teen all the way down to little toddlers,
Mhm.
especially the teens, they're numb to emotions. They don't see, or that there's no emotion, and it's difficult, because you want them to express their emotions. You want
Mhm.
them to communicate with people, and yeah, yeah, it's going to be a big mental health problem.
Yeah.
And it's going to take people like us to break down those barriers, and encourage people to communicate and form relationships, and not be numb to emotions. It's okay to have emotions,
Mhm.
um, and I mean, yeah, I mean, that's us as human beings. You have to have
Yeah.
emotion. You have to
Yeah.
see.
Yeah. The act of not having emotions is a problem. That's problematic. If
Yeah,
you don't have emotions, that's a bad thing.
yeah.
Because what the innate part of what makes us human is that emotion.
Hmm.
And we have to have that, be able to share it, be willing to express it even when it's difficult.
Definitely, definitely. You have to have those difficult conversations sometimes, and you have to, because not everybody likes to share their emotions, but at some point in their life, they're going to share their emotions with somebody,
Mhm.
or they're going to show their emotions. But when you shut all those emotions down and make people numb to it, it's not healthy at all.
Yeah, yeah, no, it's not. So with your journey in mental health, I mean, you got yourself in a good space just with little shifts, which is great because you were able to recognize it before it spiraled out of control.
Right.
And that was one of the things that I found fascinating talking to you a couple weeks ago when we talked on the phone, was because um so often when people get to the spot, like, we truly like destroy everything in our life and all of our relationships, everything before, and literally hit rock bottom before we're
Right.
like, oh yeah, I should probably do something about this now that we've burned everything to the ground. And I did find it very fascinating that you caught it earlier on, like, and I guess maybe that it's different to everybody. So I don't know to you if that was rock bottom. And well, I'm sure like to a degree it affected your previous marriage. I mean, it has certainly affected my marriage before the divorce. I mean, that was what led to a lot of it. But the shifts that you had in recognizing it earlier on, to me at least, appeared that you were able to catch it before you really sank to your lowest low.
Yeah, I definitely agree with that. And I don't know why I noticed things, but maybe I was just more self-aware. And I think some people are more self-aware than others. you know, and I think some of it has to do with your upbringing too. You know, I mean, I had a great family growing up, you know, my mom and my dad, my brothers, I had my grandparents always around, um, sharing emotions, sharing stories. You know, nobody was afraid to talk about anything. There was no secrets, you know. And so I think there's a lot of people that don't grow up with that. They don't have, you know, a great family life per se, you know, maybe, you know, they were raised by a single mom or dad, you know, and they do the best they can, but there's not that connection and maybe as many conversations. And I just feel like I could always talk about anything with my parents, my brothers, and I didn't have to hide anything, you know. And so getting into healthcare when you are around some of the people that had been in healthcare for a long time, and they tell you kind of in a roundabout way, like, you don't need to talk about this, you know. um, I realized in my head, like, no, I need to talk about this. I need to realize there's a problem. um, and I had good friends too, you know. I mean, I had some really good friends and coworkers that I could definitely depend on. um, some that are still my friends today. I don't work at the same hospital, but I've kept those connections, and I have best friends, people that know me. I know them. We know how each other ticks. We know when we talk on the phone or see each other in person. You know, if there's a problem, we know. And I think that's, like I said, truly important to have good relationships. People that don't judge you. And that's big, you know. When you have a relationship where people judge you for every little thing you do or nitpick you to death, you know, that's not a healthy relationship, and it's not going to help you. It's not going to help them. So, yeah, I feel like like I said, it goes back to being raised with that good core family, and being able to just be open about everything. It helped me realize when there was something wrong, you know, and maybe I didn't fix it right away, but I still, in my head, I knew, like, okay, this isn't right. I have to do something at some point to fix this. And just being self-aware.
Yeah, which I think is great. And I think it's important to note too, like if anybody's in that space, like, and you recognize that it's not right, don't wait for it to fester and get worse. Like, deal with it head on.
Yep.
And because I think that you're actually were able to correct your issues that you were dealing with relatively easy in comparison to maybe some other people, because you were more self-aware, because you recognize those things, and you were willing to do something about it. Because
Right.
without action, it doesn't matter. You can know that you're in a bad space, but if you don't take action on it, nothing changes. It doesn't matter how aware you are of it.
Right.
But if you're aware of it, that's like step one. And then step
Mhm.
two is do something about it. Take action.
Right. Yeah.
And so I think that's great that you were in that space, and it adds a unique perspective, because a lot of times that's not the case.
Right.
We for whatever reasons, it's just not. And I don't know why that is. It certainly wasn't for me, but
Yeah, I feel like some people definitely kind of just get lost, you know, and they don't realize there's a problem. They're just going about their day, and maybe it takes somebody telling them, you know, or having a conversation with them, or maybe they do at some point realize, like, wow, uh, this isn't right. I have to do something. But then there's those people, they go, well, what do I do? I don't I don't know what to do. And so
Mhm.
it takes people to talk to them. I mean, my friends, coworkers, they all know, my family, they all know, if you have something you want to talk about, I'm just a phone call away. Like, you can call me, text me anytime. Um, I'm there for them, you know, because I do know that some people don't realize that there's a problem until sometimes it's too late.
Yep, absolutely. It's very, very true. Scott, if people wanted to find out more about you, wanted to reach out to you and talk and connect in any way, how would they do that?
Probably Instagram is the best. My Instagram name is Scott F underscore beer brew, because I do like craft beer on the side. I do brew some beer. So that's my name. But look, you can look me up that way, or look me up Scott Frank on Instagram. That's probably the best way. And I'll be posting this and sharing this if people want to reach out as well. Just send me a message, and we'll chat.
Perfect. That's great. And that's an always an important thing to note. I say it every time, that everybody who's on here had the willingness and desire to share their story because they have a willingness and desire to help others. So
Yeah.
everybody who's come on here is more than happy to talk, to share, to help in any way, shape, or form that they can. So don't be afraid to reach out. If Scott's message resonates with you, reach out. And I will just leave you with the final thought, and that is always, what would you say to somebody who is in that dark space mentally and they're unsure of what to do, where to turn, and how to handle it?
Don't be afraid to reach out to someone. Find someone you can connect with. Somebody you can just have a little conversation with. You don't have to tell everybody all your problems, but just find that person, a coworker, a friend, a family member that you can have a conversation with that maybe will lead into helping you deal with your problems, because there's so many people out there that are not afraid to have a conversation and aren't going to judge you. And that's tough. I mean, I feel sometimes people are afraid of being judged, but there's people out there that will not judge you, that will just have a conversation.
Yeah, that's great. So true. Scott, I really appreciate you coming on and sharing your message. It was great to connect. Looking forward to connecting with you some more in the future. And
Heck yeah.
Everybody, thank you so much for tuning into another episode of Freeing Your Mind podcast. And if you have a story that you would like to share, reach out to me on social media, reach out to the podcast via email at freeingyourmindpodcast@gmail.com. Please continue to share, like, follow, leave us reviews on any platform that you watch or listen to this podcast on. The more you do that, the more it helps spread the message, the more it helps to get this podcast out there, the more ears and eyes that it falls on, the more lives we can change in a positive way, and to help everyone with their mental health and well-being, and that we can help them learn to thrive, not only survive, but thrive in the life that they're living in such a positive and wonderful way. So please do that. Please help the podcast so we can continue to grow and build. And as always, guys, thank you again. Tune in next week for another episode of Freeing Your Mind podcast. Love you all. God bless.